Have you ever heard about a doctor who kills with a single touch? There's something walking among the SCP Foundation's containment cells that shouldn't exist. A being dressed in medieval play garments who believes he's curing humanity, but every person he treats either dies instantly or becomes a mindless walking corpse. This is SCP-049, the Plague Doctor, and his story is origins that stretch into other dimensions, powers that defy every law of medicine, and brutal truths that will make you question what it really means to be cured. In December 2009, in Montauban, France, local police responded to several missing persons reports in the area. What they found when they arrived at the scene stopped them cold in their tracks. Standing among multiple corpses was a figure dressed in black robes with a medieval plague doctor mask covering its face. But here's where things got worse. Those corpses weren't just lying there, they were moving, shambling forward, attacking anything that came near them. The police managed to eliminate the reanimated bodies, but throughout the entire encounter, the robed figure didn't resist or try to escape. Instead, it simply stood there taking notes in a leather journal, observing the destruction of its so-called patients with this cold, clinical detachment, if it were studying the results of some failed experiment. When Foundation agents arrived to secure the scene, the entity spoke to them in perfect, educated French. Its voice was calm and polite as it said, "I am a doctor, and I was merely administering the cure." This was humanity's first official encounter with SCP-049, standing at 1.9 meters tall with the full appearance of a medieval plague doctor. But here's where the disturbing reality sets in. Those robes you see, that ceramic beaked mask, none of it is clothing that can be removed. The Foundation discovered through X-rays that the garments have actually grown from its body over centuries of time. The thick leather-like hide of the robes, the chitinous material forming the beak of the mask, they've all fused and become part of whatever anatomy exists beneath. Scans show a humanoid skeleton underneath all of that, but that's the only recognizably human thing about SCP-049. The most terrifying thing about SCP-049 is that its touch means instant death, and I'm not talking about a slow poison or a disease you can fight off. The moment its skin makes direct contact with yours, every biological function in your body ceases immediately. Your heart stops beating, your brain shuts down, and you drop dead before you even have the chance to realize what's happening to you. Foundation scientists have spent years trying to understand the mechanism behind this ability, but autopsies reveal absolutely nothing that explains it. There's no toxin, no venom, no biological agent they can identify. The victims simply stop living the instant contact is made, as if someone flipped a switch and turned off their entire existence. But death is just the beginning when it comes to SCP-049 because the entity carries this black medical bag with it at all times. The bag itself is anomalous because Foundation personnel have witnessed it pulling out objects that are physically larger than the bag's dimensions should allow. Surgical tools, needles, thread, and instruments that shouldn't possibly fit inside are somehow stored in there. After killing someone, SCP-049 immediately begins performing what it calls surgery on the corpse. These procedures are crude and brutal, with no consistency whatsoever between cases. Sometimes it attaches multiple limbs to a single torso. Sometimes it completely rearranges internal organs, and sometimes it removes organs entirely. The surgeries follow no recognizable medical logic or anatomical sense that any human doctor would understand. And yet somehow, these horrific procedures work every single time. Just a few minutes after SCP-049 finishes its surgery, the corpse starts moving again. The Foundation designates these reanimated bodies as SCP-049-2, and calling them zombies doesn't quite capture how wrong they are. These creatures have zero higher brain function, no memories of their previous life, no personality whatsoever. They're biological machines with only one programmed purpose, to attack and kill any living human they encounter. When they detect prey, their adrenaline and endorphin levels spike to over 300% of normal human levels, turning them into hyper-aggressive killing machines. SCP-049 genuinely calls this process the cure and believes with absolute conviction that it's saving humanity from something called the pestilence. SCP-049 has an absolute obsession with something it refers to as the pestilence, claiming this disease is infecting all of humanity. The problem is that only SCP-049 can actually see or detect this supposed illness. During Foundation interviews, the entity becomes noticeably agitated whenever questioned about the specifics, getting defensive and sometimes outright aggressive when pressed for details. In one particularly chilling interview, SCP-049 declared, "Life and death, sickness and health. These are amateur terms for amateur physicians. There is only one ailment in the world of men, and that is the pestilence." The conviction in its voice made it clear that this wasn't just some delusion. This entity truly believes it can perceive something that humanity's entire medical establishment cannot. Dr. Raymond Ham, a Foundation scientist, tried to dig deeper into understanding what the pestilence actually was. He asked careful questions during his interview sessions, but he made a fatal mistake by getting too close. The entity suddenly detected the pestilence in Dr. Ham himself, and the interview ended with the doctor dead on the floor. SCP-049 stood over his body, breathing heavily and repeating over and over, "I cured him. He was sick. I cured him." When confronted later about killing a fellow doctor, SCP-049 actually showed genuine remorse, but it also maintained absolute conviction in its actions. When asked about the Great Dying, which researchers believed might refer to the bubonic plague, SCP-049 paused and said it didn't know what that was. The entity is not referring to any known disease, it's detecting something else entirely. Here's what makes this truly terrifying. The Foundation has run every test imaginable trying to identify what the pestilence might be. They've examined victims, searched for patterns, and analyzed tissue samples. They found absolutely nothing that explains what SCP-049 is detecting. The pestilence might be a complete delusion, or it might be something that exists beyond humanity's current ability to perceive or measure. The question of where SCP-049 actually came from leads us down a path that gets progressively stranger. According to extended research, SCP-049 was presumably born in medieval France, possibly during the times of the Black Plague itself. During this era, when the actual bubonic plague was ravaging Europe and killing millions, plague doctors would walk through infected cities wearing those iconic beaked masks filled with herbs and perfumes, believing it would protect them from diseased air. But SCP-049 wasn't like the other plague doctors. While they were trying to treat the physical symptoms of the Black Death with bloodletting and primitive medicine, SCP-049 claimed to see something else, the pestilence. It walked among the dying, touching them, curing them in its own way. The entity performed its surgeries on plague victims, creating the first instances of what would later be classified as SCP-049-2. Imagine medieval villages watching as their dead relatives rose again, mindless and aggressive, while a figure in a beaked mask stood among them, taking notes. Over centuries, SCP-049's obsession with perfecting the cure led it to perform surgeries on itself. It removed its own organs to create storage space for tools inside its body, grafted the plague doctor costume directly to its flesh, and possibly even replaced parts of its brain. Through this self-experimentation, it transformed from whatever it once was into something no longer remotely human. But the entity's journey didn't end in medieval Europe. According to Foundation records, SCP-049 eventually traveled to Alagada, an interdimensional city ruled by the Hanged King. In that realm, it took on a different form, more bird-like with taloned hands and possibly wings. It wandered those twisted streets searching for its lost journal, the book where it had recorded all its knowledge about the cure. When SCP-049 finally recovered that journal through an encounter with the Black Lord of Alagada, everything came flooding back. The cure, the procedure, all of the knowledge it thought it had lost. Shortly after, the entity returned to Earth, continuing its work. Now let me walk you through the most disturbing facts about SCP-049 that really hammer home just how dangerous this entity truly is. First, this thing speaks multiple languages fluently, including medieval French and modern English. It's highly intelligent, well-educated, and frighteningly articulate. It can hold conversations, engage in debates, and justify every single one of its murders using proper medical terminology. That intelligence makes it so much worse than if it were just a simple killing machine. Second, SCP-049 actually shows genuine remorse after killing people. It's not sadistic and doesn't derive pleasure from the deaths it causes. After curing someone, it often expresses frustration that the pestilence continues to persist. This emotional response somehow makes the whole situation more disturbing because you're dealing with an entity that genuinely believes it's performing an act of healing. Third, even SCP-049 itself admits that its cure isn't perfect yet. The zombie-like creatures it creates aren't the end goal. They're failed experiments in ongoing research that's been going on for centuries. Every death is just another data point in a never-ending project. Fourth, SCP-049 becomes genuinely hostile when anyone denies the existence of the pestilence. Foundation staff are carefully instructed to avoid challenging its core beliefs after losing personnel to its anger. Fifth, there's essentially no protection against its touch. Some SCP artifacts, like SCP-714, a jade ring, can delay death briefly, but eventually, the touch always wins. There's no cure once contact has been made and no way to escape. Sixth, Foundation personnel who've witnessed SCP-049's surgeries describe them as absolutely nightmarish. The entity makes midline chest incisions, tears limbs off, and rearranges them in impossible configurations, and pulls flesh apart with surgical precision while completely disregarding any normal anatomical structure. Right now, SCP-049 is being held at Site-19 in a standard secure humanoid containment cell, classified as Euclid. Most of the time, it's actually cooperative and even cordial with Foundation staff. It genuinely sees itself as a doctor working alongside medical colleagues and expresses interest in helping understand the pestilence. That cooperation lasts right up until the moment SCP-049 detects the pestilence in someone nearby. When that happens, the politeness completely vanishes, and another body gets added to the count of people who've been cured against their will. So this leaves us with a question that's genuinely difficult to answer. Is SCP-049 actually a monster, or is it something more tragic than that?